Hey, Chris. Welcome
Hey,
back.
hi everybody.
We're going to do a sort of an extension from the polyvagal theory and applications of polyvagal and nervous system energy as applied to BDSM and kink. So if you haven't seen that one already, take a peek at it. Um, this one will also make sense, but we're gonna spend a bit more time speaking about the fawn response. Um, but before we do, let's just do a little bit of an attunement. So, what I would invite actually is for the viewer or listener to take on a posture of resignation, of giving up, of collapse, and coming into what you would experience as a hiding energy, sort of as if you could like merge with your chair or the floor or the wall and not be noticed, not draw any attention to yourself. So the face, the nose can point towards the pubic bone, the tail can tuck under like a dog when it's been scolded, wraps its tail underneath its body and sulks away. So, really just taking on that shameful, sulky energy, intentionally building a container that is hosting, role modeling shameful energy, fearful energy, unworthiness. And then on your next breath, allow your breath to inflate your body fully. You can place your palms on your thighs. And as you breathe in through your nose, you're going to make your body get tall and long. So your tailbone actually shifts back. Your heart can come forward. You can turn your gaze up towards the sky. The shoulder blades roll back slightly. You're really opening up through the chest. And then take another big breath here. Make an audible exhale. One more like that. You make an audible exhale that has a bit of a growl to it, communicating a bit of a boundary. And then one more time, we're going to experience that as a sinking down. So tailbone tucks under, chin comes towards chest, gaze towards navel. I'm going to come out of it this time a little bit quicker. So tailbone roots down, ground through your feet, press through your thighs. Inhale through your breath. Inhale through your nose and then exhale through your mouth. Audible sigh. Include a little growl or a snarl. A little bit of fighty energy to pull us out of the shamey energy. So these are some of the ways we can play with sound and play with movement and play with embodiment and recognize and embrace and ennoble ourselves to play with our nervous system. And we love talking about this, don't we? We can't get enough. After we filmed our last one, I was like, no, we got to do a whole session on fawn because in BDSM and in kink and dating and in elements of working with people at work or in your family, you might be able to recognize the fawn response, or you might have somebody fawning you and you think, I'm so great. They love me so much. And actually, they're afraid of you and they don't know how to be themselves. And so there's this protective physical response that shows up more in women than in men because it is an evolved response. So we were just talking about it before we jumped on. I really love what you shared about the nature of fawning and the evolutionary biology of the survival biology. Do you want to jump off from that spot and we'll go from there?
Yeah. So as a review or a reminder, it's always good to come back to is that when we're talking about what's referred to as the polyvagal theory and the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, there's a developmental sequence historically. And therefore, there's a little bit of like kind of time traveling that goes on when we play with these energies. So the earliest, the most archaic form is called the dorsal vagal. And that's the one that's when it's when it's in its usual functioning, is just kind of keeping the lights going and keeping the temperature of the body rightly set. It's just kind of running in the background. It's like all the stuff in your house, the the thermostat's running, the fridge is plugged in and is good, and the electricity works, and the plumbing's good, and you're good to go. You don't really focus on it, but you focus on it if something, springs a leak or the power goes out or whatever. And then the next one in line historically is the sympathetic arousal. So that's the fight or the flight when it's being used for survival energy. When the dorsal vagal is being used for survival energy, it's freeze. And as we'll talk about here, specifically one variation of freeze being fawn. So these aspects can function either in a kind of non-survival, for lack of a better word, form. I just call it its usual functioning. And then they can be co-opted, they can be brought in to participate in a survivalistic set of responses. So again, dorsal vagal, in its usual functioning, the lights are running, the temperature in the room is good, the plumbing works. Sympathetic arousal in its usual functioning would be, in this example, like the windows and doors have locks on them if you need them, and maybe there's an alarm system in the house, or just a feeling of like if you needed a warning or an alarm of something, it would go off if you needed it to. The smoke alarm. If you burn something in the pan or in the oven and then the fire smoke alarm, the smoke detector goes off, it's good to know it works. If it's being used for survivalistic purposes, it's going to kick in high adrenaline to either fight or to flee, or both. Then the most recent form is known as the ventral vagal. And this is one that's actually rooted in safety. It's rooted in engagement with oneself and with others. So there is a sense of safety. There is a sense of connection. There is a sense of attunement. So you can let down your guard with a friend, with a family member, with a loved one. Then you can have play, you can have curiosity, you can have learning together, you can explore what's going on for you? How's your day been? And when someone asks you that and you can tell that they're actually listening, not that they just said like, whatever the like social work thing. Oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? "Oh, I'm good too. It's nice to see you. It's nice to see you too. At the grocery store or whatever." But like somebody actually sits down and like, tell me about your day. And their presence is just there in a really listening, open, sweet way. Then a person can start to unwind. So that state that combines openness and curiosity, and it can be very energized, but you also feel soothed and calm and relaxed and easygoing and loose and friendly. And also, it can be, for the purposes here, when we're talking about sensuality and eroticism, it's also a really great place to become like attractive and luscious and start to kind of unwind and get more melty and start to feel romantic and um, generative with yourself or with another or others. If something goes sideways, which is going to happen in life, it's not like a bad thing. This is a survival system. It has deep evolutionary intelligence. It's allowed us to be here and survive. It's meant to be short term and temporary. When it becomes challenge is when it becomes a default setting for most people. But if there's something that goes a little sideways, it goes in reverse order. So it goes from that nice, calm, easygoing, safe ventral vagal state to sympathetic arousal. So if somebody says something and I don't like it and I get a little into my anger and I say, hey, really want to be spoken to that way. So that's enough of that. And if they do it again, I was like, I'm walking out of this conversation. Then I've exercised in a healthy way the fight and flight. I might be, charged up for a little bit, but it will pass and I'll come back to my usual easygoing state. If for whatever reason one cannot fight or one cannot flee, then it will go to freeze. So it goes in the reverse order. And then as we see, so we'll talk about a lot in this discussion, to come out of healing is to reverse the order again. So to come back out of freeze, and as freeze thaws out, to experience the fight or flight that wasn't able to be processed at the time, to have a safe way to cleanse it, and then return to ventral vagal. So the fawn response is one of a series of variations of the freeze. So one version of the freeze, like when we're doing the postural thing that Sarah just led us through, that most people might acknowledge, is that feeling of like just wanting to pull the covers over your head and like the world's too much and overwhelmed and shut down and feeling numb. That's definitely one version of freeze. Another is what's usually referred to as like functional freeze. So like a person looks like they have it all together and, they're doing their things and they look normal, whatever that is, productive, whatever. They've got their stuff together, whatever. But you get the feeling like something's not, something's not quite lining up. That can be a functional freeze. They can be running a lot of anxiety internally, even though externally they might look pleasant or, charming or polite or kind, but internally they might be really agitated and not actually calm internally. Fawning is kind of a variation on that theme, which is, again, if you're thinking in nature and in the name of the thing itself, like a fawn, it's a deer in headlights. So it's when a person puts on a face of people pleasing and being charming, and it appears that there's some nice connection and that there appears there's positivity, but usually the voice is higher and it's a little like whisperier and softer, and it feels a little like does that person have the power? I don't know if I can trust that. It can get wallflowery, whatever you want, just whatever you want. I don't have needs, just whatever you want makes me happy. Like that kind of abdication of oneself and especially of one's own boundaries and needs is usually a sign of fawning. And I really want to underscore something really important that Sarah said, which is that survival responses, whether they're fighting or fleeing, or whether they're freezing or whether they're fawning, are rooted in a lack of fundamental safety. And so a fawn response appears on the surface very safe, but it's actually rooted in an experience of not actually being safe. And the person is placating and the person is playing weak. They're not playing dead. They're not a possum. They're not just full freeze playing dead, but they're playing that kind of fawny energy, which in nature is a strategy that some will use, particularly certain prey species, to be left alone. To the thought of like, oh, they're so weak, we'll not harm them or mess with them because it's not even worth kind of the fight. And so if you see that in human to human relationships of any variety, but especially if we're talking in the terms of intimacy and sexual connection, it's a huge immediate timeout and warning flag because it's just like that's not actual consent. Because again, it's fundamentally rooted A in a lack of safety and B in that person taking up a survival strategy that has them pretending to be weak in order to placate someone else's energy. And that's not the basis of real deep intimacy or connection.
And I'm just curious, like for the listener or people that are viewing this, as Chris was sharing some of these elements of functional freeze, I know I can say, oh, yeah, that's familiar. I've had big sections of my life where that was my operating nervous system in order to survive, because that's what it's designed to do. It's an agile nervous system. It's designed to put on this armoring that allows us to keep showing up to feed the kids, to harvest the garden, to show up for the job. And have also experienced other people in that as their entire existence is in that. And then this other place of fawning to me always really caught my eye as like, what is happening here? And I love the way you described it because the ventral vagus nerve is like reading, like, huh, there's a soft voice, there's an openness, and I'm confused and concerned right now. Why am I not experiencing this as okay, fun? There's a life force here, and that life force wants to play with me. It's like not really there. You can't really experience it. And the reason that I really wanted to spend a whole episode talking about this is because consent is such an important element, and consent is so we could this is probably going to be the episode where we spend a bit more time on consent. But the thing is that I find often when I'm speaking to women, what are you resenting? What is it that's bothering you? What are you so upset about? And what they respond, what they share is well, this has been happening and I don't want it to be happening. And so then I ask them, well, have you been consenting to it? And they're like, well, I have to. And it's like, no, that's a fawn response. You don't have to. And it can happen where, and I imagine this happens for men also. I haven't seen it as much, but the thing about the autonomic nervous system, it's not like I say to myself, okay, I'm going to trip the functional freeze or I'm going to trip the fawn response. It happens, it rushes in before I have had the opportunity to really understand what's happening. And so it can just come over like a fog. This can happen in many different ways when there's maybe like a really violent situation where you're having like you know, a social work engagement or a social setting and somebody gets really big energy or really aggressive. You can see some people start to go into a fawn or a bit of a freeze where they just go stone faced. They don't quite have an answer. They're sort of like orienting and trying to reference other people to reference their nervous system of like, is this okay? Should we be running away right now? Is that acceptable? So these examples, I'm using like a variety of examples so for people to recognize this happens all the time. This is like so much a part of our life that we don't even really understand what's happening. And so sometimes fawning is because I love the way, oh God, I can't remember who was the person that shared this, but it's like it's lying for survival. It's lying because I have a belief within me that if I don't make you feel special or make you feel like I'm safe or make you feel like everything's okay, that I'm going to lose attachment to food. I'm going to lose attachment to safety. I'm going to lose attachment to social engagement. There's something that's needed within that that I haven't advocated for myself. And now I'm trying to hook you into doing it for me in a manipulative way, not because I'm an evil or horrible person, but because I have survival needs that have been the way that I've made my life safe to me. But there's elements of this that we can really instead include that there's a life force of empowerment that can transform this. And so you had another example of fawning that I thought was really great from earlier. Do you recall?
Well, the thought that was occurring in my head as you were speaking was actually something we had talked about that you had brought up, which is an important reminder as a male, for me to remember that I know it, but to feel it like I can't actually feel it in the same way viscerally, but the fawn response is not exclusive to female bodies and to women, but throughout history, like just the on average larger size of the males than the females in our species. there's a lot of history of fawning as a survival tactic, knowing that, as best as I've heard it shared for me, because I'm meant to be really empathetic and remembering and sympathetic, is that what it must be in a female body to know that like there's all these other beings that could overpower like basically at any moment.
Yeah. It was catcalling. We were talking about catcalling.
Cat calling,
Yeah. So yeah,
cat
I want
calling.
you to explore, like you just, it was such a great description of like, this is something that, um, yeah, tell that story. You did a really great job of it.
Yeah, and I was thinking of your classic example of a woman walking down the street and getting catcalled by men, but there are men who get catcalled, so it's not exclusively that way. But if we're thinking of that sort of classic variation here in light of that, get catcalled, it's immediately going to create a fear response because if it's one or potentially if it's, a group of some variety, like that's just a little bit of a threat moment. It's inherently not safe no matter what people say about, oh, it's part of some culture or it's just trying to appreciate, or it's like there's ways you can appreciate and admire and flirt that are not bad. Let's just be clear. There are lots of ways I'm pro safe consensual flirtation and courtship, and that's lovely. That's not it. That's unbidden, that's non-consensual um, focus that immediately like puts a person in an alienated spot. They're being put into the light that they didn't ask for. So they're not ready for it. They're not prepared for it. It can be from behind them. That can immediately create even more threat, or somebody coming right at them. That's a different kind of threat. So if they, such a person, if they give away too much like happiness energy, that could give the wrong message that that's wanted, which they may not likely want. If they get aggressive in response, that potentially triggers an alternative threat, which is you could create fight energy in the other or others, and then that could cause escalation. If they run away right away, that could also create escalation because it could evoke chase energy
Yep.
in the cat caller or callers. So the fawn response is kind of one of the classic ones there where it's like not too negative, not too positive, just like, and then walk and then try to just like
Mhm.
get the attention off oneself and then go away. Just a little bit of a deer in headlights moment, fawn a bit, like,
Yeah.
and then try to get away, basically, without looking like you're trying to get away too fearfully. And all of that, again, like what you were saying is really beautiful there, that all the work with the autonomic nervous system and polyvagal work is that this is happening at the level of the nervous system. This isn't like a personal moral failing or what's wrong with me and my patterns. Like this is like 500 million or whatever year, 400 million
Mhm.
years of evolution running in your body. This is an intelligence that's way deeper than our personal thoughts and opinions about whatever. And to retrain ourselves to make these whole areas that are otherwise unconsciously operating but conscious, and then remember social situations, that fawn response is an immediate signal of like, that was an unsafe experience. And so to confuse in that case, you know, conflate that with like healthy consensual flirtation is total conflation. Those are two totally different things. And you know them because they will feel in totally different experiences in the body.
Yeah. And that's something that we're going to help people understand more deeply in this membership that we're offering around dominance and submission, as well as help people practice and participate in like reading, and then sometimes like going into the response and then realizing after, oh, it happened, it happened. And there's, like you just said, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the intelligence of our system. I wanted to include in this episode how it can show up in conversations too, where people are actually conditioned to fawn other people. And you might have had somebody in your family that demonstrated this, that you began to emulate and didn't even know, like that dad that couldn't handle your emotions. And so the if they can't handle some of the emotions, maybe not all of the emotions, maybe they can't handle some emotions, then the emotions that they can't handle will be the emotions that don't get demonstrated. And the only ones that'll be demonstrated are the ones that are trying to make connection through the fawning. So it can be this pattern that we picked up through our lineage sometimes that we're then playing out again in our romantic relationships or in other relationships. And I even find it with women that will fawn other women because, well, she's just so sensitive. You can't talk to her about whatever is showing up in her life. And so you just don't, as opposed to the empowered response is, I care about you and I want to have truly intimate and transparent connection. And there's a concern that's arriving here. And so if a nervous system is too much in the blame or the aggression or in the yang of its defense pattern, it can create a mirroring of a fawning response in the opposite nervous system. And so to be able to recognize those, again, not like they're bad or wrong, but in particular, this is relevant to dominance, where if you're in the role of that primal archetypical energy and somebody else is playing the role of the archetypical energy of submission, and then there's some feedback from the submissive energy that is a little bit more in the expression, we call it bratting, or even the expression of like agency or testing. We'll talk a little bit more about testing. If you're not able to hold that, and instead it becomes this demonstration of overdone aggression or this overcharged dominance in the unhealthy expression of it, the submission is maybe not a true submission, then it might be a response to the dominance and the aggression that's actually a fawn, which is not consensual. That's the part that it's like, that's the concern here, is that if you can't hold and receive feedback that's maybe like, no, or you're pissing me off, or actually I'm just frustrated and I wish things were different, and you're getting this feedback from the person that's being supposedly submissive, but they're not being submissive in that moment, and now you're just getting pissed off, just to notice, well, the kind of ping or the chime back between the two nervous systems can have this thing that they do. And it's important to look for elements of the nervous system, like you said, of the voice really, really high. And I'm just going to go into my whiny child voice and it's fine. I don't really. And it's like, yeah, it's like that grating, like, we don't have a congruence. And that's the part that we're wanting to help people look for, is like there's an embodied congruence that still has the primal forces working through it. And it's so much fun to play with. But there's also versions of this that are messy and can be refined through practicing, like looking for different elements in the attunement of presence of self. Will take on, maybe what we could get you to do is like, can you speak a little bit about healthy presence and how a healthy presence would respond to that sort of testing energy or even that agitation energy, if it was an unhealthy response or a healthy response?
Mm-hmm. Not, I love what you shared there about we're looking for agency even for both, even while there might be the play of polarity. And that really just again emphasizes empowered submission as well as healthy, conscientious, empowered dominance as well. So if I were in a dominance, if I were in that side of the polarity and feedback was like testy or pokey, there was some energy coming my way that was poking or testing. I would want to remember what is the actual message underneath that signal. Because it'd be very easy to get caught in the noise of it. But if I'm thinking, what's the signal? What are they actually trying to communicate right now? Am I safe? Am I going to be present, or am I going to be a pushover? If they push, they want to have the experience of I could either push back, as you said, too forcefully or aggressively. That's no bueno. But also, it's no good to be a paper doll, to be paper mache, and the person pushes, and then it's like I'm pushing on an open door. The other person is just like, they just go right through them. That's not going to create safety. to then say, oh, that's the person I'm wanting to create a big container for me to submit and go into my internal ecstasy, because if I push on them, they fall over. That's no bueno either. They need the experience of they push and the push is received. They don't fall back. They don't get pushed, knocked off their heels. They're steady. You can't knock me over. You can't push me over. I'm not a pushover. But I'm also not going to be reactive and seek to control. So push all you want. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm steady. That's the kind of response that sends a signal of like, oh, what they were really looking for is reliable, deep presence and safety. They pushed on it and they got the response of, you can't push me over. I'm not going to push you back. I'm just here. What does that, what's that do for you? And that is the kind of sense the difference signal. Now that's ideally, because you asked about sort of healthy or unhealthy variations of the push. Ideally, in what people call the brat knows, or maybe can get even educated, that that's what they're actually kind of doing. They may not at the beginning know that's why they're doing it. It may be just an instinctual kind of response. There is an intelligence there, which is before you're going to surrender or submit, you better test that the person has the goods. They have the right intention, that they have the right energy, and that they have the capability and skill. So wise testing. But ideally, they would know that that's what they're doing and they know then what they're looking for, as opposed to doing it and not really realizing why are they doing it. Because if they're not sure why they're doing it, they may not yet know the feedback they're getting is either the right feedback they're looking for or not. So that's, again, various things that we can cover in the process, both for the Dom side, how to notice when you're being poked or pressed, and how not to take that personally, and remember what's the communication under the communication, which is, are you safe? Are you here? If I push on you, are you actually going to be a really clear, strong boundary and not push back, but also not be a pushover?
And that it's quite natural for people to go through some of their impulses that were their connection to their father or their connection to masculine growing up, and then to be repatterning that in a healthy way. So if you're used to getting an aggressive reaction, they might actually be looking for an aggressive reaction because it's like, that's what my nervous system was taught was love, and I'm not getting an aggressive reaction right now. But then there's an incredible healing element that comes out of it being a non-violent response that's still deeply connected in that presence. And that leads to a submission that is a non-fawning submission. It leads to a really deep layer of what is the difference between a fawn response in the nervous system. And this is just my inner landscape of what I experience. The difference between the fawn response as the nervous system is sort of like, I think we're connected. I feel like I think we're connected. I think this is sort of what they talk about in connection, but a deep submissive sub-state nervous system reset that goes into a restoration is like this sensual belonging to everything, where there's a full experience of just melting into the being sense. It's a real falling back into self, or a resting back into self, where there's a lot of peace and spaciousness. It doesn't have that. I think maybe it's this. Oh, this is, it's sort of like placating, such a great word for it. But yeah, I like this conversation because I feel like it happens often, and it can be really helpful to understand that aggressive dominance is sometimes invited to be and sometimes over exhibited as dominance, but it's not actually, not in the healthy sense of what we're talking about, at least. Yeah.
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 Yeah, if the dominance is if it's very organized around the Dom's ego, then you'll tend to get fawning responses.
Right. That's a great thing to look for. Yeah, if the energies are organized around whoever's playing the Dom role, and they have to have things be just so where they're the king and everything's about, them, like that's actually not true dominance. That's it's not. I don't even know what to call it. It's like false dominance. Like I don't really know. We need to come up with a word, Chris.
And I think what you shared there is really important, which is to go back to the map we've been using.
Yeah.
So if a person is in ventral vagal and then something happens and they go into fight or flight and then they're not able or choose not to or whatever the case may be to fight or to flee, then it goes into freeze, fawn, that kind of shutdown areas. To come out of that, to thaw out of the freeze, is then to come back into sympathetic arousal. So people sometimes think that you can just like, oh, well, the freeze is going to come off and then they're just going to, jump the line and skip the step of the sympathetic arousal. And then they'll go just from like, oh, it's all shut down. Now I'm all happy and everything's okay. It's like, oh, that's fawn again. There's a fawning. Like, that's not going to be real. Versus if they really start to thaw out, because the Dom is actually, as we've been talking about in all these videos and everything we're doing, like really space holding, no pressure, no agenda other than real love and connection and total safety and curiosity and just radical presence, trustworthy, loving presence. As the sub begins to, should they choose to do so, unwind inside of that bubble of love and protection and safety, as they start to thaw out, then don't be surprised that they hit pockets of rage, resentment,
Yep.
which may be towards that partner if they've been together a long time and they have some difficult history and they're trying to reset and, in a beautiful way, reboot their scenario. Or if it's a new relationship and it's really not towards that person, but it is towards the exes, number one, two, three, four, 10, whatever history. It can be ancestral stuff, whatever. If our map, this is why this map is so nice, because like that's actually a normal part and a healthy part of the progression.
Yep.
If that then fight energy that's now arising, they're not fawning anymore. Now they're ready to fight. If there's a safe, contained, understanding way for that to be worked through and cleansed and completed, then they really actually return to ventral vagal, not in this fake performative, oh, I, like you were saying, oh, I think this is it. I think I'm doing the thing it says in the book. I think I'm doing the thing they said in the video, whatever. No. Like it really is like, okay, now they might say, okay, now I'm really actually ready to like entrust some power to somebody and I want to go within and I want to experience some pleasure and some ecstasy. Now we're talking.
Yeah, so if
And
anything, you can almost take it as a compliment. If you're getting some like blamey energy, if you're getting some criticism, if you're getting some like heat, it's like, okay, that's good. That's freeze fawn coming into its own agency, unhealthy expression of it. That's why I had us kind of do the growl and the snarl a bit, is like, that's a healthy invoking of that energy. So that's a fun way to play with it. Sorry, I cut you off, but I just want to make
no,
sure
it's
I got
totally,
that part of like, that is not
yeah.
a problem. If you understand, you can track and understand and see what's happening there, then it's actually a compliment of like, okay, good, we're warming up.
That is actually safe space. That, yeah, exactly. There's the fun one I like, which is you can do partner practice. You both get on all fours, hands and knees, and go shoulder to shoulder, like right shoulder to right shoulder, or left shoulder to left shoulder, whatever. And in this case, the person in the Dom space is going to be the receiver. And then the sub, who's now got some activated aggression energy, that sub character is going to try to push the other person back. And like we were saying earlier, the Doms actually just like anchors themselves and see if the other person can push them. They're not pushing them back. They're not trying to aggress backward, but they're also not being a walko, cakewalk or whatever. Like they should really be able to root themselves, and you can get the growls, and it can just be a really fun and playful, safe way, not to try to performatively gin up such energy in one's being, but rather when it organically arises in the proper order, that is, the safety has been established, it's all slowed down, the person starts to unwind a bit, and then they notice, like, oh, now there's all this, like,
Mhm.
energy, then it, like, these kind of fun, safe, playful ways to get it out, it's very loving, is uh is helpful at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, because ultimately we want to come into our animal bodies. So playing the animal sounds and the animal movements are such great ways of activating these animal bodies. Conquest play, we touched on this a little bit, is sort of another example of that. Of like, I'm going to run away, and I actually get to burn off some of that um, more
Light
like,
energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also just like the expression of like it brings me out of the hypervigilance, and that hypervigilant energy now can circulate and move around a little bit. But then also, there's a little bit of like healthy aggression of pushback, or being like held down. Then you're able to experience yourself coming more into your embodiment. And for a woman, this yin can be this overly in the head, got to figure things out in the outer world, and we want to drop down in her body. So it's a really great way to play with those elements of it. And you will hear the voice shift more down into the feeling center in the heart, or into the heart womb center. It'll be this deeper, lower expression of a central, sultry voice that is able now to access desires. This place of, this is what I'm longing to experience in my submission, can be said from that agency. And you'll be able to hear if it's a true yes, where there's consent, or if it's sort of this placatey, fake, false. And if you're curious, if you're wondering and you're doubting, then you're right. That's what it is. Because you won't doubt it. When you read legitimate energy, it's just like, it's so clear. Like there's a chime where bodies are just like we come, like this is why we teach it with the element of the Tantra, is because you can really start to feel the negative and the positive, and the positive and the negative start to communicate to each other to create this over unity battery that I love that Chris talks about. And if you want to watch that episode, it's a whole episode about it. Should we touch on some of the firewater pieces of this?
Hmm. Hmm. Um, yeah, I just wanted to underscore something you said there that I think is really important, which is that if not sure, from speaking more from like the Dom or the Yang side, if not sure, establish stronger dominance and stronger presence. And like set up your rules as a Dom that you're only going to work with a real yes.
Yeah.
And you're not interested in any fake yeses. Like that itself is a mode that actually allows stronger dominance that is really nurturative to empowered submission.
If
Versus again, the earlier examples you were using of like placating the dom or like it's about their ego, like that's the statement that's not about ego, that's a statement that's actually about what's truthful, what's aligned, what's generative for everybody, which means as dom you have to be able to sometimes hear some feedback like this isn't working. Okay, great, I want to know that because I actually want to do the stuff that's actually wanted and is going to bring deeper connection. And so we all have to check ourselves of like, am I in this for ego gratification, or am I in this for because this is actually generative and playful and I feel drawn and there's a yoga here and there's a path and
yeah,
yeah.
and kind of quick test is if it's ego, it'll want to take as opposed to provide. And so it's just like a simple like, am I in that space? And that's okay. Like that's the art form of like, can I sit back into the space of being the presence? You said you touched on it a little bit of expanding your presence, and I feel like we could talk about that
Mm.
just a tiny, tiny bit more. Um, I'm trying to come to the place that I remember exactly how you said it, but basically it was like establish the boundaries more clearly, or establish the. Do you remember what you were saying?
Yeah, that as a dom, for example, you can set up what you're a big part of healthy conscious dominance is like to be really clear about your domain and what it is in your bailiwick, if you want to call it that, like your domain. And so one of the rules of the kingdom, one of the rules of that domain can be we only work here with consensual real yeses. That's it. No fawning wanted. If it's noticed, it's totally human and we can work through it or whatever. It's not like to shame it, but just to say like to really say from the beginning, like empowered consent is sort of the law of the land, if you like.
Yeah.
It's the ethos.
And will be articulated in particular in the beginning, verbally at least, as like latter and more nuanced, involved, evolved expressions that it can just be from the animal body and its noise and movement, but initially advocating for the empowerment to be really explicit of this is what I'm desiring to experience. Good things to look for.
And the other one that we talked about anger may arise as a fight response and fleeing energies may arise when it's coming out of fawn. The other one is sorrow and grief. To be on the to be, you know, ready to receive if and when it emerges because um if there's anger, if there's hurt held in the body and it's starting to process, then there's going to be the sadness about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, asking yourself, am I comfortable being present with a whole gamut of emotions and not being drawn into that inviting hook? Sometimes a little hook that can show up in codependence.
Or trying to or going
Away from, yeah,
or
dissociate.
just going absent and
Yeah.
because if someone is in the dom position they're holding the space, so yeah, a big part of working on the conscious dom side is like be okay with your own grief, learn to have a healthy relationship with your own anger,
Yeah.
learn to have a healthy relationship to your own fear and the cultivation of courage. Because if you're going to be the space holder and the purveyor of a space and someone else shows up with that stuff and it's clean in you as a Dom, it's clean in someone as a Dom, then they're in a wonderful space to be present, to remain radically present, pervading, loving, connected without fixing, caretaking, rescuing, co-opting, managing, but also not just going like, oh my God, I'm out of here. There's nothing that would, you don't want to drop the signal,
Yeah.
at that point either. So if it if it stirs up something in us to see someone sad and we're not okay with our own sadness, we're not going to be able to be present for someone when they're in their grief.
Yeah.
Alternatively, if we're good with our own grief and we have a healthy relationship to it, then we're available to be radically present in a loving and appropriate way. And that's part of, again, we're not focusing on it primarily as a healing journey, but it does have profoundly healing potentialities. Yeah.
Yeah, moving stuck energy in all of its form has this beautiful side effect of lightness and more connection and more love and more experiences of sensitivity. And it's really, really beautiful. So it's like not what we're going for, but it often is like, oh, yeah, there's this incredible side effect to it. And it's okay if you've had that experience in the past and you're noticing, like, oh, yeah, that has been my pattern. Well, that's perfect. Come join us. We'll teach you how to read it, how to work with it in particular from the dominant side. Chris will be leading that, and I'll be working with the submissive side and helping yin or those who organize their energy in such a way to have the empowered submission side. So it's a really unique perspective of like both have power. both are agents of power. They're just playing with power in a pulling power or a pervading and a wrapping power. We're going to touch on the fire water thing.
Yes. So there's this classic formula in Taoist sexual yoga or sexual alchemy, erotic alchemy, and the formula is fire underwater. And there are a lot of ways to look at this, and we have some other episodes where we go into it. But one way I thought about for here in relationship to a fawn and coming out of freeze response is that the water element, which symbolizes deep feeling, sensitivity, tenderness, caress, safety, trust, could be thought to exist or be rooted largely in the second chakra. So that's low belly, that's our creative center, that's our sexual organs, whatever kind of sexual organs we have. So that low belly space area of the sexual organs and the genitals. That's where the water is. And the notion of the fire under the water is, the a crucible with some water in it and a fire source underneath it, and then it's going to slowly create deep, what we've called yin arousal, yin oriented arousal, which is slowed down, safe. So if the water is in the second chakra, the low belly, and the fire needs to be under the water, then the only place left for the fire is the first chakra, which is the root. So the pelvis, the sacrum, the hips. And from an energy point of view, as well as a nervous system point of view, I'd say what that part of our being expresses in its healthiest function is a feeling of being fundamentally safe and secure in our own physicality. That's what the hips and the pelvis and the sacrum are really about. Meaning, alternatively, if there are experiences, which there are for basically all of us to one degree or another, it's a wide spectrum, but of interference or coercion or violation of fundamental tenets of safety, particularly in the realms of physicality, then that will show up there as combinations of freeze, places where there was overwhelm and then shut down and it tries to freeze around a painful place. And there'll be numbness as well as a lot of rigidity and lockdown. And so when we talk about how fundamental consent is and how fundamentally that is rooted in an approach that begins, continues by, and culminates in this experience of being slow and really allowing each experience to be digested and not rushing and actually staying attuned the entire time. The reason that is so important is because for the fire to get under the water, to get the really deep arousal, to get into the animal body, to get the real consent, to get the voice deepening, first and most important step in that is that the root of the person feels fundamentally safe. And if it does, they will start to unwind there. They'll start to unwind at their root and they'll start to unwind in the place of their sexual organs. And that's where old resentments and griefs may be stored, or places that are numb and that are kind of trying to come back online. And as they do, and as that other stuff cleanses and moves through, what comes back online is feeling, it's radical aliveness, so that we actually can feel really deeply safe and secure in our own physicality and in the physicality or the presence of another who's safe and can experience incredible turn on and really deep arousal and really deep longing and really deep desire that can show up in desire to submit or to melt, to be ravished, and to go into ecstasy. But that root where the fire is going to go in order to warm up the water from below, it has to get the experience of it, that there's no agenda and there's no force, and that there's literally no pressure. And to experience what it is to be beheld, contained space, like there's total space holding, pervading, adoring, with no other agenda than that. And that's kind of like a tuning fork. And it's sending an entirely different signal than the one that we've all been entrained in around our sensuality, our sexuality, and our eroticism. And then when that signal is strong and clear and steady and repeated, like a tuning fork, you hit one, you put it by the other one eventually starts vibrating without being struck according to the tone of the first. But in the meantime, it's going to have to unwind and it's going to have to shake off other memory and other forms of entrainment and other kinds of experiences that are the opposite of built out of safety and consent.
So in this case, we're talking about the fire as a deep sense of safety. I would I I would read that one of the things you could look for in attunement is that the breath will be low and it'll be long. It won't be kind of high and apical and sort of, that sense of I'm fine, that sort of like that sort of I don't know, like I've seen this so many times, but it shows up so often for women of like, what's the difference in this? Because many when women have had the experience of that, we got to get there. Where are we going to? We got to get there. And this is what Chris is saying. There's nowhere to get. There's not like, we're not trying to get to sex. We're not trying to get to an orgasm. We're not trying to get to anything. Because the moment that the root feels like, oh no, they're trying to get into me or they're trying to get something from me, or that sort of transactional agitation of I'm not present. I need to get the thing because I'm inadequate in some way. And I need to, whatever that story and experience, that pattern that could show up. So one of the things you can look for is the breath will be low and slow. But also, I just wanted to refine this part where we've talked about fire as adoration and this
Mm-hmm.
place of my curiosity is at what point is adoration, trying to soften you to get to the thing, right? It's like, let me just tell her she's pretty, so she says yes to me, or, whatever it is.
That's not,
Right?
that's like a kind of fawn in the other direction.
It is totally. That's what I mean.
It's not adoration. Yeah.
It's not adoration. So how can you tell the difference?
The adoration is really true to its word as much as any of us are capable of, which is if the intention is the agendaless agenda of just deeper love, connection, and intimacy, that actually shows up in real congruent behavior. That's a really practical, concrete, embodied way that adoration is shown. But there's not a move towards some form of deeper intimacy or deeper zone, up to perhaps including penetration, unless it is explicitly and enthusiastically pleaded and almost commanded slash begged for
Yep. By the yin, by this.
by the yin
Yeah.
to
Yep.
actually really orient to the jobs that space hold, to witness and to marvel, to adore, to pervade, and to be there with a healthy detachment about outcome. And we're all human. Nobody needs to be 100%. You don't need to get like, oh my God, I'm gonna rigid about it. Like, it's okay to feel things. It's okay to have for all of us to have conditioning, but as much as possible to really stay in that seat of space holding, witnessing, pervading, beholding, and then just watching the magic happen and trusting that at some point that will lead to the yin is a receptive energy. It wants to receive. So if the fire gets under the water and if the water is slowly being boiled and brought to a steam, the yins will ask to receive. They will desire, they will verbally, and then also, as we said, eventually non verbally through breath and bodily posture and body signals and nonverbals, they will clearly desire and state what their desires are. And that's their path. That is the part as a Dom that one can't do for them. That's this whole point of the intimacy and the profound. There's power on both sides and there's vulnerability on both sides.
Mhm.
And the vulnerability, or one of the vulnerabilities on the Dom side, is to be responsible in a profound way for the whole process. The other is like you can't actually make them get there. You can only create all the conducive situations, and they either choose to surrender and submit into their process or they don't.
Yeah, so the agendaless agenda and that healthy detachment is a cornerstone. And it's one that, again, like check in with yourself. Do you know where your agenda is? Can you catch, oh, it's this pattern that I've had, which I believe is the way this goes, but actually that's an agenda that I have to follow the pattern that I know as like this is successful. No, that's the agenda that your ego or nervous system is most familiar with, which is okay. Noticing that it's there can be so healing. And then sitting back into it is so enticing to the yin. It really activates that fire under the water, like you were saying. So it's kind of this funny, like if you can just rest back into that moment and notice that the agenda has this stationary element to it. It's very solid and grounded. And that brings this fire up in the yin. That's really beautiful to experience.
There is a fasting. There is like a kind of an asceticism.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a fasting from the old way. And especially if it's a tender one, certainly it can be when if someone's been missing touch or there's been a period of dryness or lack of connection in this way, and now they're starting to have this beginning moment of, whoa, they're starting to get a little warm, whoa, they're starting to get a little warmed up. And then that's where it can be like the reflex, the old instinct is like, now's the moment, it's like, now is not the moment.
No, it's not.
Now is not, that will do nothing, but that fire is very, very, it's small when it starts. It's just this very, it will eventually, if you can do the right thing of fire tending and put the bellows and, on the thing, it can eventually get like conflagration level. Like it can get to a beyond what a Dom may have ever considered as possible and what maybe a sub has ever even experienced of their own arousal pattern. Like the fire can get vast and deep and extremely potent. But if it's just starting, nothing will snuff it out faster than graspy, clingy. Oh, they're a little turned on now. Now's my no. They'll immediately go back into, oh, it's not actually safe. This is just another agenda. It's just a subtler version of the same game. They put on the good face for a while, but now I see the mask is off. Now I see what it's really. This is the same old game. And then either fawning and pretending that it's all great, and then the other person gets, maybe they miss that and get the false signal. This is great. And then the other person's just stewing in resentment,
Yeah.
which is going to explode at some later point. Or they'll just get immediately into just clench and aggression or just lockdown, and that's that.
Yeah.
So there is a real asceticism of, like you said, breathing. Don't rush. If it starts to work, don't get like, oh, it's working. Like that's, you can tell it's like the energy's going up. It's like, go back down, breathe, and just watch and stay with the tending of the fire water
Yeah.
with no agenda as much as is humanly possible. And it can be very powerful and healing to have experiences for yins, for submissives, to have an experience where they go through a lot of fire water and deep arousal while they're clothed and they're not being touched,
Yes.
as another practical way to experience adoration. And how would one know it? Like, how would we really send the message? Okay, we said all the nice words, but what does it mean in practice? And what's the actual embodied version of it? That can be really healing, that
Yeah.
it doesn't actually have to go to even touch or any of that right away, much, and then to have multiple experiences of that, that creates the safety that then they might actually, in fact, want to surrender and want to receive deeper forms of physical intimacy at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Expanding the presence time around safety so that patterns are allowed to come through, but not be in the escalated form that they can when the animal bodies are, running some of the survival energies. This is almost creating a space for smaller elements of survival energies to move through. There's like this image of like bats coming out of a cave.
Right.
They
Yeah.
like emerge
There's a
sometimes, and it's all right. But to be able to make a space and expect them, we're going to anticipate that that could be the case, and that because there's no agenda to get anywhere, then that could be really transformative because we're dealing with creation energies. Creation energies bring up survival patterns. So, well, we could go on and on about this, and that's why we're inviting people to come and work on the material. So, if this is something you're interested in, then please reach out. We've got a membership where people are able to practice learning on a weekly basis, as well as to connect and to come together and to participate in both the Dom and the submissive sides, being able to articulate and share and the loom and do some workshops and more to come on that. Anything that you wanted to include for kind of wrapping up?
It's always how appreciative I am of getting to work in this space with you. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel the same. I'm looking
Mm.
forward to being able to share and show and help people understand how magical this way of being embodied in these primal forces can be, and how, again, it just happens to be healing as a side effect of being in the human form. So, thanks so much, Chris.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, everybody.